July 1, 1863, 7:30 in the morning. The Pennsylvania summer heat is already rising as a massive column of Confederate infantry marches east along the Chambersburg Pike. This is General Henry Heath's division, 7,000 veteran soldiers of the Army of Northern Virginia. Their orders are simple: advance into the small crossroads town of Gettysburg and secure supplies. They are marching in a loose column formation, weapons slung over their shoulders, completely unaware that they are walking into a meticulously prepared kill zone. 3 miles outside the town, the terrain rolls into a series of parallel ridges. Waiting on the reverse slope of Hare Ridge is the Union cavalry. 8 o'clock. Union General John Buford has recognized the critical tactical value of the high ground south of the town. Knowing his cavalry cannot hold off a massive infantry assault forever in open combat, he decides to buy time. He dismounts his troopers, transforming his cavalry into a highly mobile infantry force. Buford spreads 2,700 men across a wide front along McPherson Ridge. They are armed with breech-loading Sharps carbines. These weapons allow them to fire 3 times faster than the Confederate muzzleloaders. As the vanguard of Heath's division crosses the Willoughby Run Creek, Buford's men open fire from the tall grass. The element of surprise is absolute. 9:30. The Confederate advance is completely stalled. Heath realizes he is not fighting the disorganized local militia. He deploys his artillery and begins organizing his brigades into wide battle lines to crush the Union resistance through sheer numbers. The Confederate cannons open fire, hurling solid iron shot across the valley. Buford's troopers take heavy casualties and run desperately low on ammunition. The defensive line is on the verge of total collapse when a massive cloud of dust appears on the horizon behind them. 10 o'clock. The Union First Corps, commanded by General John Reynolds, arrives on the battlefield at a dead sprint. Reynolds recognizes the absolute necessity of holding the ridges and rides directly to the front line to coordinate the counterattack. He orders the legendary Iron Brigade, famous for their black hardy hats and ferocious combat record, into the McPherson Woods. Just as Reynolds turns in his saddle to shout orders to the advancing Wisconsin regiments, a Confederate bullet strikes him in the back of the neck, killing him instantly. The highest-ranking officer on the field is dead, but the Iron Brigade smashes into the Confederate lines, initiating brutal, point-blank combat among the trees. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The battle escalates from a skirmish into a massive, uncontrolled meat grinder. Tens of thousands of troops from both armies pour into the fields northwest of the town. The Union line holds for hours against overwhelming odds, but the geometry of the battlefield shifts fatally. From the north, General Richard Ewell's Confederate Second Corps arrives. They perfectly position themselves on the exposed right flank of the Union Army. The Yankees are now caught in a devastating V-shaped crossfire. 4 o'clock. The Union lines shatter. The retreat devolves into a desperate, chaotic rout. Thousands of Union soldiers sprint blindly through the narrow, brick-paved streets of Gettysburg, pursued by screaming Confederate infantry. Men are gunned down in alleyways, captured in basements, and trampled in the panic. However, this chaotic withdrawal serves a critical purpose. The surviving Union forces scramble up the steep slopes of Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill just south of the town. They dig into the rock and establish the ultimate high ground. 5 o'clock. General Robert E. Lee arrives on the battlefield. He rides his horse to the crest of Seminary Ridge and raises his binoculars. Across the valley, just 1 mile away, he sees the shattered remnants of the Union Army regrouping on top of Cemetery Hill. Lee recognizes instantly that if the Union forces are allowed to entrench on that high ground, dislodging them will be mathematically impossible. He sends a courier with a critical order to General Ewell. He instructs Ewell to assault and capture Cemetery Hill, if practicable. 5:30. Ewell receives the order. His men have just marched 20 miles and fought a brutal urban battle. He looks at the steep, imposing slopes of Cemetery Hill. He sees the Union artillery hastily deploying at the summit. Ewell decides an attack is not practicable. He orders his men to halt. The Confederate advance stops dead at the base of the hill. Midnight. Ewell's hesitation becomes the defining tactical error of the campaign. Throughout the night, the rest of the Union Army of the Potomac arrives. General Winfield Scott Hancock takes operational command of the heights. He utilizes his engineering background to perfectly position the incoming corps. Tens of thousands of Union soldiers are swinging pickaxes, chopping down trees, and moving massive boulders to create impenetrable defensive breastworks. July 2nd, 6 o'clock in the morning. As the fog lifts, the Union Army is deployed in a massive, 3-mile-long defensive formation shaped like a fishhook. The barb rests on Culp's Hill, the curve wraps around Cemetery Hill, and the long shank extends straight south down Cemetery Ridge, terminating at 2 rocky elevations known as the Round Tops. The Union forces possess interior lines of communication. They can shift reinforcements to any point under attack in a matter of minutes. 8 o'clock. Lee refuses to retreat. He formulates a massive, synchronized assault on the left flank of the Union Fishhook. He tasks General James Longstreet's First Corps with the main thrust. They must march completely unseen to the extreme southern edge of the battlefield and smash into the Union line before the enemy can react. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Longstreet's men are in position, but the Union line has unexpectedly shifted. Union General Daniel Sickles, directly disobeying orders, has marched his entire Third Corps half a mile forward into a vulnerable peach orchard. He has completely disconnected himself from the rest of the Union Army, explosives both of his flanks. 4 o'clock, Longstreet's cannons open fire. 14,000 Confederates surge forward. They smash into Sickles' exposed men at the peach orchard and a nearby wheat field. The fighting is savage. The wheat field changes hands 6 times in 2 hours, the ground turning completely red. 5 o'clock. The Confederate assault pushes deeper, slamming into a chaotic maze of massive, house-sized boulders known as Devil's Den. The combat devolves into brutal, point-blank firefights among the rocks. Men are firing muskets at ranges of less than 10 feet. The Union defenders at Devil's Den are overrun and slaughtered. 6 o'clock. Just above Devil's Den, the 20th Maine Infantry Regiment anchors the extreme left of the entire Union Army on the rocky slope of Little Round Top. If they fall, the Confederates will roll up the entire Union line from behind. For over an hour, they repel wave after wave of assaults from Alabama and Texas regiments. 7 o'clock. The men of the 20th Maine are completely out of ammunition. They are taking fire from 3 sides. Colonel Joshua Chamberlain realizes that retreating means the destruction of the Union Army. He draws his sword and orders his men to fix bayonets. With a massive scream, the entire regiment charges downhill directly into the advancing Confederates. The shock of the downhill bayonet charge completely shatters the rebel assault. The Confederates surrender by the hundreds. The extreme left flank of the Union Army holds. 10 o'clock at night. The fighting finally stops. The battlefield is littered with over 15,000 new casualties. Inside a small farmhouse, Union General George Meade holds a council of war. He analyzes the attacks of the past 2 days. The Confederates hit the right flank. They hit the left flank. Meade looks at his commanders and predicts exactly what Lee will do next. Tomorrow, Meade says, the attack will come right here, at the center of our line. He orders maximum reinforcements to Cemetery Ridge. The trap is set. July 3rd, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The stifling summer heat is shattered by the largest artillery bombardment in the history of the Western Hemisphere. 130 Confederate cannons, stretched in a massive line along Seminary Ridge, open fire simultaneously. Their target is the dead center of the Union line. The concussive wave from the synchronized blast physically knocks men off their feet. In seconds, a thick, impenetrable wall of white sulfurous smoke rolls across the valley, plunging the battlefield into an eerie, choking twilight. 1:30. The Confederate plan relies on absolute destruction of the Union defenses, but a fatal technical error occurs. Due to a defect in the manufacturing of Southern artillery fuses, they burn just a fraction of a second too long. In the blinding smoke, the Confederate gunners cannot see that 90% of their explosive shells are sailing high, flying completely over the Union infantry and exploding harmlessly among the supply wagons in the rear. 2 o'clock. Union Artillery Commander General Henry Hunt recognizes the Confederate error. He makes a cold, brilliant tactical decision. He orders his Union cannons to slowly cease firing and pull back behind the ridge. He wants to conserve his ammunition for the inevitable infantry assault, but more importantly, he wants to deceive Robert E. Lee. Listening to the Union guns fall silent, the Confederate command believes they have successfully annihilated the enemy artillery. 3 o'clock. The Confederate artillery fire slowly ceases. An unnatural silence falls over the valley. In the woods of Seminary Ridge, General George Pickett asks General Longstreet for the order to advance. Overcome with dread, Longstreet cannot speak. He only nods his head. 15,000 Confederate infantrymen step out of the tree line. They align themselves shoulder to shoulder, forming a staggering, unbroken battle line that stretches a full mile across the horizon. 3:05. The objective is a small copse of oak trees at the center of the Union line, nearly a mile away. The Confederate soldiers march at a measured pace of exactly 110 steps per minute. The afternoon sun catches the steel of 15,000 fixed bayonets, creating a shimmering wave of light.
Union soldiers watching from the heights later describe their blood running completely cold at the sheer majesty and terror of the approaching machine. 3:15. The deception is revealed. The Union artillery was not destroyed. As the Confederate line crosses the halfway point of the valley, 80 hidden Union cannons are rolled back into position on Cemetery Ridge. They open fire with solid iron spheres. Fired at low trajectories, these bowling ball-sized projectiles skip violently through the grass, tearing massive bloody gaps through entire columns of marching men. The Confederate officers scream orders. The soldiers step over the dead, dress their lines, and keep walking. 3:20. The Confederate advance hits a fatal topographical obstacle. The Emmitsburg Road runs diagonally across the valley, bordered on both sides by heavy, wooden post and rail farm fences. To cross, the rigid Confederate formations must stop, break their lines, and physically climb over the timber. Momentum dies. 15,000 men bunch together, becoming completely stationary targets. 3:25. Seeing the enemy stalled at the fences, the Union artillery switches ammunition. They load double canisters, massive tin cans packed with dozens of heavy iron balls. The cannons are essentially transformed into giant, industrial shotguns. When they fire into the clustered Confederates at a range of less than 300 yards, the noise morphs into a continuous mechanical roar. The blasts literally vaporize the front ranks, shredding the wooden fences into lethal splinters. 3:28. The slaughter is not just coming from the front. Because the assault is aimed at the center of a concave defensive line, Union infantry units on the wings swing forward like doors. The 8th Ohio Infantry on the right, and Stannard's Vermont Brigade on the left, will their formations 90 degrees.
They pour devastating, point-blank enfilade fire directly into the exposed sides of the Confederate column. It is a three-dimensional crossfire. 3:30. The Confederate charge is disintegrating, but through sheer, unbelievable force of will, a few hundred Virginians push through the crossfire. General Lewis Armistead places his black hat on the tip of his sword, raises it high above the smoke, and screams for his men to follow him. They hit the low stone wall at the angle, the very center of the Union line. 3:35. The Virginians breach the wall. The combat instantly devolves from organized volleys into primitive butchery. Men use the heavy wooden butts of their rifles to crush skulls. They fight with bayonets, rocks, and bare hands around the smoking muzzles of the Union cannons. Armistead places his hand on a captured cannon, yelling that the day is theirs, before he is immediately gunned down by a volley of Union fire. 3:45. The breach is localized and completely unsupported. General Meade has flooded the center with reserves. A massive swarm of fresh Union infantry rushes into the copse of trees, sealing the gap. The remaining Confederates are completely surrounded. Exhausted, out of ammunition, and bleeding out, hundreds of them throw their rifles to the ground and surrender. The high water mark of the Confederacy has officially crested and broken. 4 o'clock. The charge is over. In less than an hour, over 6,000 Confederate soldiers have been killed, wounded, or captured. The 1-mile valley is completely blanketed with the dead and dying. The survivors, a fractured fraction of the invincible army that stepped out of the woods, turn their backs to the Union line. They slowly limp back across the corpse-strewn field, leaving a trail of blood in the trampled grass. 4:30. General Robert E. Lee rides out from the tree line to meet the shattered remnants of his men. The illusion of his perfection is entirely gone. As weeping, bleeding soldiers pass his horse, Lee removes his hat. He looks down at the destruction he ordered,
and repeats a single phrase over and over. It is all my fault. The Army of Northern Virginia will never launch a major offensive on northern soil again. Nightfall. As the sun sets on July 3rd, the skies over Pennsylvania darken, and a heavy, torrential rain begins to fall, washing the blood into the soil. 51,000 Americans are dead, wounded, or missing. Lee prepares for an agonizing retreat back to Virginia. The Civil War is far from over, but the myth of Confederate invincibility lies permanently buried in the fields of Gettysburg. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video if you want more pure, unfiltered historical chronicles. See you on the next battlefield.